Money has a way of exposing truths that people try to hide. I learned this standing outside my father's study, hearing him discuss my future. Or rather, the lack of one he had planned for me. We can't afford both. Rachel. My father's voice was cold and final. Olivia's law school has to take priority. Sophie will have to settle for the diner job. I felt my heart sink. 22 years of feeling like the family afterthought suddenly came crashing down. Olivia, the golden child, would get the opportunities I'd been dreaming of, while I was expected to work at Pete's diner, day in and day out. Don't you think that's unfair? My mother's voice wavered, but I could tell she wasn't fighting for me. We promised both girls we'd help with their education. But my father's response was quick and dismissive. Olivia has real potential. Rachel, Sophie just needs to be practical. Practical. That was the word they always used for me. I had to accept what was given. Never dream too big. The weight of it all crushed me. I backed away from the door, my chest tight with a combination of anger and defeat. For years, I had convinced myself that I was imagining the favoritism. But now it was clear. I was invisible to them. I grabbed my jacket and keys, needing to escape before I did something I'd regret. But as I reached the door, Olivia appeared, looking perfect as always. "Where are you going?" she asked, concern in her voice. "I'm not feeling well," I muttered, heading for the door. "Wait, Sophie, is everything okay?" she called after me. "Perfect," I replied, not able to stop the bitterness from slipping out. Just like always, I heard her footsteps behind me. But I didn't stop. The door slammed shut behind me. And I didn't look back. Halfway down the driveway, my father's voice boomed from the porch. "Get back here right now." "Young lady." I turned to see him standing in the doorway, the familiar disappointment etched on his face. "Why?" I shouted back, my voice breaking with years of frustration. "So you can tell me again that I'm not worth it? That Olivia deserves everything?" "You were eavesdropping," my father said, his tone darkening. "Damn right I was," I replied, "and I'm glad I did." My mother appeared behind him, tears in her eyes. "Sophie, please, let's talk." "Talk about what?" I snapped. "How you've spent years investing in Olivia while telling me to be practical. While making me settle for a job at the diner?" Olivia's face had gone pale. She didn't know what to say. "That's not fair," she whispered. "Life isn't fair," I shot back. "But you wouldn't know about that, would you?" My father's voice dropped, cold and commanding. "Enough, Sophie, you're being childish." "Childish?" I laughed bitterly. "For what? For wanting a chance? For wanting to be more than second best?" Silence fell, thick and uncomfortable. My mother was crying now, and my father's face twisted in disappointment. "If that's how you feel," he said finally, "maybe you should leave, until you calm down and can be reasonable." "Don't worry," I said, my voice steady with finality. "I'm done being reasonable." With that, I slammed the door behind me. Not looking back, I didn't want to go back inside. But I couldn't just leave things hanging. So, I turned around and walked back through the door, my heart pounding in my chest. My father stood by the door, arms crossed. "Sophie, calm down," he said, his tone sharp. "You're acting irrational." "Calm down?" I echoed, the anger bubbling inside me. "How am I supposed to calm down when you've spent my whole life treating me like I don't matter? Like I'm not worth your time?" Rachel stepped forward, pleading. "Sophie, please. You're upset. We didn't mean it like that." "You didn't mean it?" I snapped, my voice rising. "For 22 years, you've been telling me I'm just practical. That I should settle for the diner while Olivia gets everything handed to her. And now you want me to be okay with that?" Olivia stood quietly by the stairs, looking uncomfortable, but I wasn't going to back down anymore. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I'm done being second best. Done being the one who has to settle while she gets to dream big." My father's face hardened. "You're being childish, Sophie." "Childish?" I laughed bitterly. "You think I'm childish because I'm standing up for myself?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. My mother's eyes filled with tears. But I didn't care anymore. This was my truth, and it was finally out in the open. "I'm leaving," I said quietly, not looking back. "I'm done trying to fit into the role you've assigned me." With that, I walked out the door, The weight of everything lifted as I stepped outside. For the first time, I felt free. I didn't know where I was going. But I couldn't stay there. The night felt heavy, the weight of everything pressing down on me. But for the first time, I felt something different, something like freedom. The thought of going to Aunt Clara's house, her little sanctuary away from the chaos, seemed like the only thing that made sense. I didn't even call ahead. I just drove. When I pulled into her driveway, I felt a quiet relief wash over me. Aunt Clara had always been my escape. The one person who saw me, really saw me. She didn't expect me to fit into the mold my parents had created for me. When I walked through the door, Aunt Clara was sitting by the fireplace, as if she'd been waiting for me all along. "You look like you've been through a storm," she said, her voice soft but knowing. I sank into the chair across from her, rubbing my eyes. I'm done pretending. I'm done being the backup plan. Aunt Clara didn't ask any more questions. She just handed me a cup of chamomile tea, the familiar scent of lavender filling the air. It was comforting, but there was something else. Something that made my chest tighten with uncertainty. After a long silence, Aunt Clara spoke again, her voice steady but with an edge of something, maybe urgency, maybe wisdom. "Sophie, I've been saving something for you." I looked up, confused. "Saving something?" She nodded, pulling a thick envelope from the drawer next to her. "This is for you. I've had it ready for a long time. But I was waiting for the right moment." I took the envelope, my hands trembling slightly as I tore it open. Inside was a bank statement, an account with my name on it, and a balance that made my head spin. I stared at the numbers, barely able to process what I was seeing. "What is this?" I whispered, my voice shaking. Aunt Clara leaned forward, her eyes kind but firm. "It's yours, Sophie, all of it. I started saving for both you girls when you were born. But I kept yours separate. I had a feeling you might need it more." My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. "You've been saving this, for me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She nodded. "Your parents knew about Olivia's fund. But I kept yours hidden. I wanted you to have options. Not just be stuck in the life they've planned for you." Tears sprang to my eyes. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't expected anyone to see me this way. Like I was worth more than just settling for whatever crumbs they left me. This changes everything," I said quietly, my chest tight with emotion. Aunt Clara's smile was gentle, but there was a strength behind it. "You don't have to thank me, Sophie. You've always been capable of so much more. I just wanted to make sure you knew that." The weight of her words hit me harder than the money ever could. It wasn't about the account balance or the money itself. It was about the belief she had in me. The belief that I was more than what my family had let me be. I stared down at the statement, the weight of it all settling in. For the first time, I felt a spark of hope, a flicker of something more than the life I had been forced into. I wasn't just the second daughter anymore. I had choices now. As I clutched the envelope in my hands, I made a promise to myself. I would take this chance. I would build something for myself. And I would prove to everyone, especially my parents, that I wasn't someone to be overlooked. Before I could speak, Aunt Clara broke the silence again. "You've got a lot of options now, Sophie, but remember, it's your choice. You don't owe anyone an explanation." I looked at her, a sense of determination rising in me. "I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to show them that I can make something of myself, on my own terms." And with that, for the first time, I felt like I was finally in control of my future. The path ahead of me wasn't set in stone anymore. It was mine to choose. The next few weeks felt like a blur. The weight of my new reality settled over me. But instead of feeling burdened by it, I felt free. For the first time, I wasn't living for anyone else. I was living for me. Every decision, every step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd lost long ago. I didn't waste any time. I started looking for a job. Something more than just the diner. Something that would allow me to build the life I'd always dreamed of. It wasn't easy. I spent hours tailoring my resume, making calls, and going to interviews. It felt like I was constantly fighting against the world that had once told me I wasn't enough. But every rejection only made me more determined to keep going. And then it happened. One call, one email, and I was offered a position as a regional manager at a restaurant chain. It wasn't the corporate job I'd imagined, but it was a start. It was a chance to prove that I could take control of my life. That I wasn't just the girl who was stuck. I walked into the office for my first day, my heart pounding with nerves and excitement. As I stepped through the door, I felt a sense of power. A quiet confidence in myself that I hadn't known was there. I wasn't just starting a new job. I was starting a new life. I threw myself into the work, learning every detail, making connections, building relationships, and it wasn't long before I started seeing the fruits of my labor. I was good at this. I was good at leading, at managing, at making things happen. Slowly but surely, I began to climb. Every promotion, every new responsibility, felt like a victory not just for me, but against all the years of being overlooked. And through it all, Aunt Clara was there, always a steady presence, always reminding me that this was my path, my choice. "You're doing it, Sophie," she'd say, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "You're building something great." But it wasn't just about the job. It was about reclaiming my sense of self, about taking back the power I had given away for so long. With every step I took in this new direction, I was learning to trust myself, to believe in my own potential. And it was working. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. I wasn't holding my breath, hoping that my parents would see me as worthy. I knew I was worthy. I had always been. The more I thrived, the more I realized that I wasn't just breaking free from my parents' expectations. I was breaking free from the person I thought I had to be. I was becoming the woman I had always known I could be. The woman who had been buried under the weight of everyone else's dreams. I didn't need to be their second choice anymore. I didn't need to settle for anything less than everything I was capable of. I was taking control, and there was no going back. Just when I thought I had finally built the life I deserved, the world threw another curveball at me. It started with a phone call, one that I wasn't expecting, but that I knew was coming. Deep down, Aunt Clara's voice crackled through the phone, tense and urgent. "Sophie, it's Olivia. She's in trouble, serious trouble." I barely had time to process her words before she continued. "Her boyfriend, Mark, he's been arrested. They're saying he ran a Ponzi scheme. A huge one. And Olivia's caught in the middle of it. Your parents are trying to cover it up. But I thought you should know." I felt a chill run through me. A mix of disbelief and something else, something I couldn't name. Olivia had always been the perfect daughter. The one who could do no wrong. She was the golden child. The one who had the future everyone else dreamt of. And now, here she was, tangled up in a mess she couldn't escape. But it wasn't just the scandal that hit me. It was the realization that, for the first time, Olivia wasn't the one who had it all figured out. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't invincible. She was just like me, someone who had been deceived. Someone who had made mistakes. The irony was almost too much to bear. I sat on the couch, phone still pressed to my ear, trying to wrap my mind around it all. "What do you want me to do, Aunt Clara?" I asked, my voice shaky, even though I tried to keep it steady. "I'm not sure what I can do." Aunt Clara was silent for a moment. "She's asking for your help. And you need to make a decision. Do you stand by her? Or do you let her face the consequences of her actions alone?" I could feel the weight of her words settle in. Olivia had always been the one who had it all. She had the support, the love, the future. I was the one who had been left to struggle, to fight for every inch of what I had. But now, I was being asked to help the person who had never had to fight a day in her life. The dilemma tore at me. I wanted to help her. I wanted to be there for her, despite everything. But the truth was, I couldn't forget the years of being overshadowed, of being dismissed as the practical one, the one who wasn't worthy of the same opportunities. Olivia had always had everything handed to her. And now she was the one who needed help. My phone buzzed in my hand. Olivia's name flashed on the screen. And for a moment, I just stared at it. I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't know if I could offer her the help she needed. Or if I should just walk away. Let her face the consequences alone. I took a deep breath and answered the call. "Sophie?" Olivia's voice cracked. She sounded small, broken. "I need your help. I've messed up. I should have known. I should have seen the signs with Mark. I was so stupid. I could hear the rawness in her voice. The shame. The fear. Part of me wanted to reach out and comfort her. To tell her everything would be okay. But another part of me, one that had been buried for so long, wanted to remind her of everything she had taken for granted. The chances I never had. The way I was always told to be practical while she got to chase her dreams. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice tight. Because you're the only one who knows the truth. She whispered, you've always seen through the lies. And now, I need that strength. I need you, Sophie. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking for your help. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words. The burden of the decision ahead of me. She was my sister. She was family. But I couldn't ignore the years of being second place. Of being the one who always had to watch as she got everything I ever wanted. I thought about my journey, the struggles, the victories, the people who had overlooked me. And for a brief moment, I thought maybe this was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when I could finally let go of the anger, the hurt, the moment when I could help her. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'll help you, I said, my voice low but resolute. But this isn't just about you, Olivia. This is about you facing the consequences of your actions. I'm not here to clean up your mess. But I'll be there for you. Whatever happens. The relief in her voice was palpable. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know what this means. I hung up the phone and sat there, staring at the wall. This wasn't just about Olivia's downfall. It was about me, too. About finding a way to move forward. To let go of the past. And to step into a new role. I wasn't the second daughter anymore. I wasn't just the one left behind. I was Sophie, and now, it was my turn to decide who I was going to be. The days that followed were a whirlwind of decisions, phone calls, and meetings. Olivia's life was unraveling at an alarming speed, and I found myself thrust into a world that felt far removed from the life I had been building. But despite the chaos, there was a quiet resolve in me, a calm determination that I hadn't felt before. I wasn't just standing by and watching. I was taking action. Olivia had been thrown into a storm. And though I had every right to turn away, to leave her to face the consequences of her choices, something inside me refused to let her drown. Family was family, and no matter the years of resentment or the bitterness that had built up between us, she was still my sister. The first step was getting her out of the mess she had found herself in. Together, we found a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud cases. Someone who could help Olivia navigate the mess Mark had left behind. It wasn't easy. Every conversation felt like peeling back another layer of a lie. And with every revelation, the truth seemed uglier than the last. But through it all, I kept reminding myself why I was doing this, because no one else would. There was still a part of me that resented how easily Olivia had been handed the world on a silver platter, while I had to fight for every scrap. But as I watched her face the fallout from her own actions, something in me softened. She wasn't perfect. She was flawed, just like me. And I realized that maybe, just maybe, we were more alike than I had ever allowed myself to believe. One afternoon, as we sat in a coffee shop, Olivia's hands trembling around her cup, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. I don't know how to fix this, Sophie, she whispered. I've made such a mess of everything. You always knew what you wanted. You've always been so strong. I've been lost. I took a deep breath. The words I'd been holding onto finally bubbling to the surface. You're not lost, Olivia. You just need to accept that you can't keep running from your mistakes. But you can rebuild. You can start over, just like I did. She looked at me, hope flickering in her eyes. How did you do it, Sophie? How did you move on from everything? I smiled softly, a wave of compassion washing over me. I stopped letting everyone else decide who I was. I stopped pretending to be what they wanted me to be. I started listening to myself, my own dreams, my own desires, and when I stopped looking for their approval, I found my own path. The air between us shifted, the weight of the past slowly lifting. We weren't just two sisters caught in a rivalry anymore. We were two women who had learned from their mistakes and were ready to face the future together. No more comparisons. No more expectations. We could be whoever we wanted to be. without anyone telling us otherwise. Later that week, I sat down with my parents. The conversation was long overdue. It was time for them to see me, to truly see who I had become. I didn't go into the discussion with anger or resentment. I went in with clarity, with strength, and with the knowledge that I was no longer the daughter they had tried to mold me into. Mom, Dad, I began, my voice steady but firm. I've spent my whole life trying to meet your expectations. But I'm done. I've built my own future. And it's not the one you planned for me. It's the one I chose. There was silence on the other end of the table. My father's eyes were hard. But there was a flicker of something, regret. Maybe, or recognition. My mother's face was pale, her lips trembling slightly, but she didn't say a word. They were finally seeing me. Not as the second choice. Not as the backup, but as someone who had taken control of her own life. Olivia needs your support, I said, my voice softer now. But you need to know that I've found my own way. And it's time for both of you to accept that. I stood up, not waiting for a response. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had found something far more important, my own voice. The reconciliation wasn't instant. It wasn't perfect. But it was a beginning, a new dawn. My relationship with Olivia slowly shifted. Not just out of obligation but because we both understood, in a way we never had before, that we were two women capable of owning our futures. As I walked away from that conversation with my parents, I felt lighter. The past no longer had a hold on me. The weight of their expectations had finally been lifted. And I realized that it was never about their approval. It was about mine. Looking back on everything, I saw it for what it was, an opportunity. A chance to rewrite my own story. One where I was in control. Where I defined my worth. And this time, I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to live my truth. The future was mine to shape. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to embrace it. Not just for me, but for the woman I had become. Months had passed since that pivotal conversation with my parents. Things weren't perfect, nothing ever truly is, but they were different. I had made peace with my past and taken control of my future. And now I was moving forward, with a newfound strength I hadn't known I had. Olivia and I had started to rebuild our relationship. Slowly but surely. It wasn't easy. She was still reeling from the fallout of her choices. Still grappling with the weight of her mistakes. But we had something we hadn't shared before, honesty. We talked more openly now. And for the first time, I saw her not as the golden child, but as my sister, struggling just like I had. We spent weekends together, sitting over coffee, laughing at silly things, and just being. No more comparisons, no more hidden resentments. And in those quiet moments, I saw her healing, just as I was. As for my parents, things had settled into a new dynamic. We didn't have the same relationship we once did. But there was a tentative respect there now. I wasn't the daughter they had planned for. But I was the daughter I was always meant to be. And while we didn't always agree, they were starting to see me in a different light. They didn't have to understand my choices, they just had to accept them. Work was going well. I had a new sense of purpose. A sense of ownership over my career that was both humbling and empowering. I was no longer just a manager, I was a leader. My team looked to me for direction. And I gave it with confidence. With a clear vision of where I wanted to take things. The days of feeling small, of hiding in the background, were long gone. I was carving my own path. And I was damn proud of it. One evening, after a long day at work, I met Aunt Clara for dinner. She'd been my rock through all of this. The one person who had believed in me when no one else did. We sat in our usual booth at the small diner she loved. Her face lit up by the soft glow of the overhead lights. "I've been thinking," she said, sipping her tea slowly, "about how far you've come. You've turned your life around. Sophie, I'm proud of you." I smiled, my heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you. Aunt Clara, you gave me the chance I needed. You gave me belief." She shook her head, her eyes twinkling. "No, Sophie, you did that for yourself. I just helped you see it." That simple acknowledgement, the recognition of my own strength, was all I needed. For years, I had been waiting for others to believe in me. But now, I realized the most important belief I needed was my own. The journey had been hard, harder than I ever could have imagined. There had been pain, betrayal, and loss. But in the end, it had shaped me into someone stronger. Someone who knew her worth and would never settle for less. And I wasn't done. I looked out the window as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the streets. For the first time, I wasn't scared of what the future held. I was ready to face whatever came next. Knowing that I had the power to shape my own story. It wasn't just about proving my parents wrong anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about building something real. Something that was truly mine. And I was finally free to do that. So, as the night settled around us, I looked at Aunt Clara and smiled. You were right. It's only just beginning. If you've enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like Sophie's. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. And share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Thank you for being part of this incredible adventure.